In this video, we'll build a complete responsive website with HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap. Okay guys, so before I show you what I'm going to get us started with inside of our text editor, I want to take a moment to thank you for liking the video that I put out just the other week. For this video, I'm setting a goal of 800 likes, so please remember to like the video, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe and turn on your notifications. First, let's take a look at how the website is going to appear on desktop computers and laptops, and then we'll take a look at the responsiveness with the mobile version on the right and how the sections will respond to different device widths. So from the top of the website, we're going to have this bar with a phone number off to the right, and when we click on the phone number, it's going to prompt us to make a call depending on what device we're on. So here on my Mac, it'll be FaceTime. Then underneath that, we're going to have our navigation bar. So on the left will be our logo, which I'll provide you with in addition to the rest of the images throughout the design, and then on the right we'll have our navigation links as you see, which will turn into the drop-down navigation menu at a certain width, which I'll show you how we can customize. Then underneath the navigation we'll have our image slider, which we'll be adding our own custom background color to display our text, as you can see here with the white color, and then our buttons will be custom as well, and we're going to place the content on top of our image slider on the middle, right side, and the left side here, as you can see with the third slide. So moving down the page, we're going to have our built with ease heading, and then our custom border that's underneath that, followed by the text, and then this 3-column section with the images, heading, paragraph text, and buttons underneath. Then moving down the page, we'll have our matrix fixed background image section with the blue and red pill, and when you select one of the pills, we're going to get a pop-up modal effect. So you can select the blue pill or the red pill, and when I select the red pill, in my case here, as you can see, we have my favorite emoji popping up, and that's going to be the same for the blue pill as well, but you can change that to a different image if you want. You'll also see that above and below the fixed image background section, we're going to have a bar that will span across the page, and when we click that bar, we're going to have this crew of emoji GIFs, which I used in an older tutorial, and when we click on the bar beneath the fixed background image section, it will open and close them as well. And underneath that nav bar, we're going to have this 2-column section with the text and button off to the left, and then the image on the right, followed by the Jumbotron with this text and button where it says contact us today. Then in the footer, we'll have a logo, text, and then these social media icons, which you can link to your various social media pages with. So now let's take a look at the mobile version on the right, and we'll see how different sections of the website will respond to different device widths. So when I flex the window up, you're going to see that the navigation is going to transition into the full width navigation at 992 pixels, but I'll also show you how you can change that breakpoint as we're laying out our HTML. Then beneath the navigation, we'll have our image slider, which will be customizing the transition speed as well as the delay time of, and then the content on top of it will transition in size as we flex the window down, getting to the point of there being no content on top of it at all, which I'll show you how you can change around when it comes to the width or breakpoint at which the image slider removes all of the content on top of it. Next, we'll have the 3-column section, and as you'll see, when we flex the window down, it's going to jump in size because we're going to use a class called container instead of container-fluid with Bootstrap, which would give it a fluid transition to the responsive width. And moving down the page, the fixed background image section as well as the pop-up modal will work just as well on mobile devices and tablets. And our emoji GIFs, which will appear underneath the nav bar, will go from a 4-column section down to a 2-column section, and then a single width column underneath the 768 pixel mark. Then further down the page, as we get down to the 2-column section, we're going to have this breakpoint at a larger screen width, and we'll also learn how to center the text on the left vertically before it flexes down to a smaller screen size. And as you can see, when we flex the window down, the 2-column section is going to turn into the single column at 992 pixels, and underneath that we'll have our Jumbotron with the text and button, followed by the footer section with the social icons. So in the description of this video, I have a download for you with all of the prepared files and images included in the download for this tutorial. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the files that are from the description of the video right here, as you can see. And the first thing that you'll notice is this blue file where it says Bootstrap themes. So if you double click on that file and open it up in your web browser, you'll see that it's going to be this blue gradient page with some information about my 12 website bundle pack. And the website that we'll be building today in this tutorial will be most like the first one that you see up here on the left, which is the agency theme. And to support my channel, I'd appreciate it if you checked out the 12 website bundle pack and the bonuses that are included with it so I can keep making tutorials like this one. So getting back to the starter files included in the video description, I'm going to have index.html and style.css open in my text editor, which you see behind Google Chrome, and I'm going to be using the free text editor called Visual Studio Code. And in just a moment, I'm going to show you what's already included for us in index.html, as you see right here, and in style.css. But first, I want to show you a resource in case you're unfamiliar with the text editor. So if we just go to w3newbie.com and then go to the resources page, you'll see that I have a lesson on the Visual Studio Code text editor here. And in that lesson, you'll get an introduction to Visual Studio Code, as well as these links to the Visual Studio Code shortcuts and the extensions that I use, which are Eagle, Oceanic Next, and the Live Server extension. And in the video, I'll also show you how to import all of my settings in Visual Studio Code, which you'll see further down the page. So moving back over to the website that we'll be building and Visual Studio Code, if I hit Command B or Control B on a Windows computer, you'll see the sidebar where we can take a look at the images, the JS files, and the CSS files. And inside of the CSS folder, we're going to have a file called bootstrap.css. So I'm going to look at that in just a moment, but first, if you're unfamiliar with Bootstrap and you'd like to get a brief introduction, if we go back to the resources page, you'll see that I have an introduction to the Bootstrap grid system for website layouts here. And the grid system is basically just a CSS framework which will allow us to add columns to our website really easily with their predefined styles. So from that page, you can get a link to Bootstrap's website at getbootstrap.com where you can see the examples of the framework. But just to give you a quick example here, if I go over to index.html and hit go live in the lower right hand corner to start the live server extension, then I just type in a heading here with an H1 tag and type in text. You'll see that when I save it, we'll have our text appear. And then if we were to add a class called text-uppercase, which is already styled for us in the Bootstrap library, you'll see that we have our text uppercase here on the left. So I've included the bootstrap.css file in here as a reference point. We're actually going to be using the bootstrap min.css file because it takes up a little less space when we load the web page. But if you want to do a search for the class that we use as we're building our Bootstrap website, you can just select Command F and then the search feature is going to appear. And then you can type the class in and go down and see the predefined style that's attached to the HTML class that we add in our index.html file. And as I mentioned previously, I'll go over some of the Bootstrap documentation as we're laying out our website. Now let's go over what's already included for us inside of the index.html and style.css starter files. So from the top of index.html, we have our doc type for HTML5, then language English inside of the actual HTML tag. Then in the head section, which tells the web browser how we want our website displayed, we have meta char set UTF-8 for the standard character set for numbers and letters on the internet, followed by viewport with device width initial scale 1 for mobile devices. Then we have a compatibility meta tag for Internet Explorer and Microsoft Edge browsers. Then we have the title of our website and the fave icon underneath that, which will show up in our web browser tab. And with fave icons, you can use ICO, JPG, or PNG. So if we just go into the IMG folder, you'll see faveicon.ico, and that's the little fave icon image, which, as I said, will show up in the web browser tab. And to show you the tab, let me just pull down the web browser. And typically with fave icons, you want to make them no larger than 80 pixels by 80 pixels, but most are 40 by 40. And moving back over to Visual Studio Code with the Explorer sidebar open, let's take a look at the CSS files. So first we have the bootstrap min.css file right here, followed by the style.css file, which we'll be editing. And then we have a link to Google Fonts. And the font that we'll be using for this design to match the agency theme at w3newbie.com is the Montserrat font. So that'll be this style that we're seeing throughout the website with different font weights. And if you want to select your own Google font, you can just do a search for Google Fonts or go to fonts.google.com and then do a search for the font you want. So for example, with Montserrat, if I just type in Mont and then I hit the plus sign, we're going to get this black bar at the very bottom of the page. And once we pull that up, we can go into customize the font. So I'll just add a few different font weights here. and then go back to embed. And this is going to be the link that we'll use to reference our font family inside of index.html, and then the font family reference for style.css. Then moving back over to index.html, let's go down to the bottom of the body section where we'll find our script files referenced. So the first file will be a reference to jQuery, which is required for Bootstrap JS to run. And with jQuery, we're going to use the 3.4.1 version because Bootstrap JS isn't compatible with the 3.5 version that jQuery just put out recently yet. So the bootstrap min.js file will allow us to tap into the Bootstrap JS library for features such as the drop-down navigation, the carousel image slider, and scrolling down the screen, the Modal pop-up with the blue and red pill, as well as the emoji navbar that's underneath that. Then underneath Bootstrap JS, we'll have poppermin.js, which is recommended for the modal pop-up, followed by a reference to the font awesome JavaScript file, which is included inside of the files right here. So if you're unfamiliar with font awesome, that's an icon library which will allow us to add icons such as the plug and the social media icons at the bottom of the page. And if you'd like to add icons different from the ones that we add in the website, you can just go to fontawesome.com and then to their icons tab, and we'll just do a search for smile to get a smiley icon. And you can just select whichever one you want. And once we do that, it's going to give us the HTML, as you can see here. So I'll just copy that and then go back over to index.html. And then I'm just going to scroll back up to the top and paste that in. And now if we save it and take a look at the document in Google Chrome, we'll see the little smiley face, and we can also add a class called fa-2 to 5x to increase the size of the icon. So now that we've covered everything in index.html, let's go over to style.css and see what's already included for us. The first thing you'll see is a reset of the body tag, starting with overflow x hidden, and that style declaration will make sure that there's no horizontal scrolling left or right on the document. Then underneath that, we'll have our font family from Google Fonts and the color of the fonts throughout the page, such as the heading right here underneath the image in the 3-column section. So moving back over to style.css, you'll see that we have a number of comments included for us where we'll add our CSS throughout the document, including these media queries started for us already, which will be the responsive breakpoints of the website when we flex up and down the page. So for example, with the image slider, content on top of it right there. Then we'll also have a cheat sheet for the Bootstrap breakpoints, which we'll be covering throughout the website for the different responsive device widths, which we'll specify inside of our column classes. And also included for us is a fix for a potential mobile gutter horizontally, which could happen on mobile devices with the fixed background image. So I've included that for us already. So this will be similar to the overflow x hidden. You would see a little bar on the side of the page on cell phones, but that style declaration will prevent that. Then finally, at the bottom of style.css, I've included some style for us already that's really specific for iOS with iPhones and iPads to make sure that the fixed background image section displays properly on those mobile and tablet devices. Okay, so now that we've covered all that's included for us inside of the starter files, let's go back to index.html and get ready for our first tag. The first part of the website that we'll lay out in our index.html and style.css file will be the top bar that we see here. And just to give you a quick introduction of how I'll be using the Visual Studio Code text editor, I'll just show you a couple of examples for how we can lay out our HTML. So with the Emmet feature in Visual Studio Code, we can add our tag and then add a class after that with a period, or add an ID after it with a hashtag and then hit enter, and it's going to populate our HTML tag. Also, if all we're using is a div or divider tag, we don't need to add div before it. We can just add hashtag my ID or period my class, for example. In addition to that, we can also add elements inside of elements using a greater than symbol in between the two. And we can add an asterisk if we want multiple elements. So for example, if I say ×5, we're going to have 5 different buttons. And then we can also add a class inside of those 5 buttons with the button class, for example. So starting off the HTML for the top bar here at the top of our website, we're going to use a non-Bootstrap class that we'll just call top bar. And then inside of that, we'll have our Bootstrap container, which will set a max width for the element, making it so the phone number off to the right doesn't span outside of the 1140 pixel max width associated with the container Bootstrap class. Then inside of the container, instead of using a row, which we would normally do with Bootstrap and we'll cover in just a bit, we're going to use the class col-12 to take up the full width of the page. So as you may already know, if you checked out the resources page at w3newbie.com with the Bootstrap lesson, or you've made Bootstrap websites before, the Bootstrap grid system is made up of 12 columns, and we can use those 12 columns however we want across all 5 different device widths. So we have extra small all the way up to extra large, and we can change the number of columns based on these device widths, which we'll learn about more as we start laying out the multi-column sections of the website. So using col-12, as I said, it's going to span 100% of the container, and it's also going to give us a little bit of padding around the text that we're going to add inside of it. And we can also position the placement of the text by using text left or text right, which is what I'm going to add here. Then inside of that, we'll have our actual paragraph tag, and inside of that, we'll have a link for the phone number. So for the phone number, if you take a look at the bottom left of the screen, when I hover over it, you'll see it's tel:+ the phone number. So that's what we're going to add inside of the anchor text or the link here. So we'll just say tel:+ and then plus, and then whatever phone number you want to add without any dashes in there. So I'll just use a fake phone number here, for example, and then write out the text here, or just copy it and paste it, which I'll do a few times throughout the tutorial, or you could just write lorem in Visual Studio Code for dummy text. So now if we go back over to Google Chrome, we're going to see our text at the top of the page placed off to the right with the blue shade showing us that it's a link. So now let's go about adding our style to the top bar. So what we'll want to do is reference that class in style.css underneath the comment that I've already added for us. So we'll just reference that with a period since it's a class, and then top-bar. And we're going to give this a background shade, which has a hex value #7AAEC4. So now if we save it and take a look at Google Chrome, you'll see that we have the blue bar spanning across the whole page. And now we can make some adjustments to the height of the top bar. So let's give it a height of 2.8 rem. And if you're unfamiliar with rem, 1 rem is equal to 16 pixels. Now let's add some padding to make it so the text isn't all the way at the top. So we'll say padding 0.5 rem top bottom and 0 left right. And now if we save it and take a look, we should have our text right in the center, as you can see right here. So now let's change the link text to the white shade instead of having the blue anchor text with the underline. So we'll want to reference the A tag inside of the top bar class with top bar A, and then we're going to just give it a color of white. So you can write white or #FFF. And then for the text decoration, we're going to add none to get rid of the underline. And the last thing that we'll do to our text is let's make it a little bit larger with font size 1.1 rem. So now with the increase of the font size, if we go back and toggle back and forth between the completed version and the version we're working on, it's going to match up to the original. Now let's drop down to the next element and start laying out the HTML for our navigation menu. So I'm going to go back over to index.html and locate the navigation comment here. And the first thing that we're going to add with the Bootstrap navigation bar is the nav tag, and inside of that we'll have a class called Navbar. So all of the classes that we use for the navigation bar will be directly from Bootstrap with their Navbar feature. So if you want to learn more about that, you can go to the documentation, but most of the classes you should find pretty easy to understand. So the first thing that we're going to do is set a background color to our navigation, and we're going to use BG-light eventually for the white background, but so we can see the navigation bar better at first, we're going to make it a dark navigation bar with the background color class BG-dark, and then we'll make the links light in color with the Navbar-dark class. And we'll also add a class to tell Bootstrap when we want our navbar to expand from the mobile version to the full width version, and we'll start that class with navbar-expand. Then we have the option to make it expand at medium screen widths or large screen width. So in our case, we're going to use large screens, which is the 992 pixel mark. Then inside of the nav tag, we'll use a container class to set a maximum width for our content inside of the navigation. So now if we save our HTML and take a look in Google Chrome, we'll start to see the navbar show up with the dark background as you can see there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change it back to the light version with navbar-light and bg-light. Now that we have our navbar set, let's start adding our content inside of it. So the first thing that we'll add will be the logo, which is going to be wrapped in a link. So we're going to use the A tag for our link. And I'm just going to write A, and this is going to have a class called navbar-brand from Bootstrap. And inside of that, we'll have our image, which the link will wrap around. Then for our link, ideally, if you're making a multi-page website, I would recommend the logo link going back to the index.html page. So I'm just going to write index.html in here. And then for the image source, we'll add img/, and it's going to be logo.png. Then with images, we have the option to write alternative text if our image doesn't show up for some reason. So I'll just write logo, and we can also add a title, which I'll write logo in as well. So now with the title, if we were to hover over our logo image and just give it a second, you'll see the logo text appear. And then, for example, if the image didn't show up properly, we'll see the alternative text right there displaying, which says logo. So I'm not going to do the alternative text or title throughout the rest of the page, but you can add that if you want. Then next, before we add our navigation links, we're going to add the drop-down menu button, which we see right here, and that will open and collapse our navigation. So let's add button, and we're going to give this a class called navbar-toggler, and inside of that, we're going to have a span tag for our hamburger menu, which is going to be the icon that you see right here, and that's going to be span.navbar-toggler icon for the class. And I'm just going to drop the span tag down to a new line here. And now if we save it and take a look in Google Chrome, we'll see the navbar-toggler hamburger icon. So now what we'll need to do is we'll need to add some Bootstrap JS library features to the button. So we're going to add type button, and then we're also going to add data-toggle collapse, and the Bootstrap JS library will know to open and collapse the data target that we give it. So for the data-target, we're going to give it the ID that will give our navigation menu right here. So we're going to wrap the unordered list and list items with an ID that we'll call navbar responsive. So I'll just write navbar responsive. So let's start laying out the element that will wrap around our navigation unordered list. Before we add the ID, we're going to need to use some classes for the collapse feature. So we're going to say div class collapse and then navbar-collapse. And then we can give it its ID, which will be the navbar responsive text right here. So you can just copy that or type it out. Then inside of this, we're going to have our unordered list for our navigation menu list items with the links inside of them. So we're going to give our unordered list a class called navbar-nav, and we'll have the option to place our navigation menu links at their full width on the left, center, or right. So if we wanted them placed on the left, we would use a class called mr-auto, margin right auto. And if we wanted them in the center, we would use mx-auto, but since we're putting them off to the right, we'll use ml-auto for margin left auto. Then inside of our unordered list, we'll add our list items. So I'll add li times 5 because we're going to have 5 different list items, and each one will have a class called nav-item. Then inside of that, we'll have a link, and each one of those links will have a class called nav-link. Then we can add our navigation links. So as I said previously, if we were making a 5-page website, we would add the name of the HTML files here so we can link to index.html and about.html, for example, with an about page. But for now, we'll just leave index.html in there and add our link text. So in between the A or anchor text tag, I'm just going to write home. And now if we save it and go back to Google Chrome, we'll see our first navigation menu link inside of the drop-down menu, as you can see right there. And we'll sort out the spacing and the size of the logo in just a few minutes. And we'll also want to add an active class to the menu link of the page we're on. So I'm just going to write active here for the home link. And if you look closely, the home link is going to change to a black color instead of that gray shade, but it'll be easier to see once we add the rest of our links. So let's do that now. I'm going to write the about link, as you can see right there. And then we'll just fill out the rest of the links. So I'll just write services, projects, and contact us. And then if we save it and take a look in Google Chrome, we'll have all 5 of our menu links filled out. Next, let's start laying out the CSS for our navigation menu in style.css. So the first thing that we're going to style will be our logo because it's too big in size right now. So we'll want to reference the Navbar brand class in addition to the image for the logo. So let's go down to the navigation comment here in style.css, and I'm going to write navbar-brand and then img for the image, and we'll reduce the height to 3 rem, which is the equivalent of 48 pixels. So now that our logo is resized, let's focus on restyling the navigation menu links. And to do that, we'll want to target the actual navigation navbar class. So in index.html, we'll just look to the nav tag, and it's just going to be the navbar class there. So I'll write period navbar, and let's increase the font size to 1.15 rem, and then we can save it and take a look. And then we'll also just make the text bold with font weight 600, which will use the font weight from our Montserrat Google font. And I'm going to space out the letters by 0.1 rem to make them fill up a little bit more space. So now if we look in Google Chrome, it's closer to the original, but the original has the navigation menu links spaced out a little bit more. So to space them out, instead of targeting the links, we'll want to target the class that we gave the list items. So that's going to be the nav-item class that we see right here for the li or list item. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give it a padding of 0.5 rem all around, which is 8 pixels. So now if we save it, we'll see that it should be matching up pretty nicely, but the color for the navigation menu links on the finished version are darker. And then of course we have the blue, active, and hover navigation menu link. So let's target the actual nav link class to make the color of the links darker. So I'll just add period for the class here, and then nav-link. And the color that we're going to give it is sort of an off gray shade with a hex value of 5B5555. And we'll also need to add exclamation point important to override the navbar-light class, which Bootstrap uses to give the navigation menu links their gray color. Then what we can do to give it the blue, hover, and active color is we can just copy this navlink CSS and paste it below, and we'll want to target the active class. So if you remember for the home link, we gave it this class. After nav-link, we have the active class right here. So we'll just add period active to target that class, and then comma, and we'll also target the navlink hover pseudo class when we hover over the link. And we're going to change the hex value to 4981B3, which is the blue shade that we'll use throughout the website, which is the color of the W3 in the logo and similar to the blue background. So now if we flex the window down, we'll see that the navigation is taking on its mobile version when we want it to, and it's matching up to the original, except for the shadow, if you noticed, beneath the navigation menu in the original version. So what we'll do is let's go back over to the Navbar CSS, and we're going to add box shadow, and we're going to give this a value of 0 horizontally, and then 0.5 rem vertical, and also 0.5 rem for our blur radius. And for our color, we'll use RGBA or red, green, blue, alpha, and we'll use all zeros for the colors, which will give us black. And then for alpha, if we make it 0.9, you'll see that it's going to be a really dark shadow. So we'll reduce this all the way down to 0.1, which will be a nice subtle shadow. And then in order to get our box shadow to display on top of the image slider, we're going to need to give our navigation menu a positive Z index. So we'll just say Z index 1. Now let's get started with the first part of laying out our carousel image slider. So let's go back over to Visual Studio Code and locate the comment where we'll start adding our image slider HTML. So that's going to be just beneath this image slider comment that we see here. And we're going to start this off with Bootstrap's Carousel ID. And then we're also going to add a class called Carousel and a class called Slide to the same div. And then once we hit enter, we'll also add data-ride carousel for the Bootstrap JavaScript library. And we'll need to give this an interval. So we'll say data-interval. And this is going to be the delay in between the slides transitioning. So we'll come back to this in just a little bit once we can actually see the image slider images so we can see how long the delay is. For now, we'll just leave it blank. And I'm going to grab this closing div tag and place it down by the end image carousel HTML comment. Next, let's drop down inside of the carousel content comment, and we're going to add a div class which will contain our carousel images and the content that's inside of it. So let's add a class called carousel-inner, and then inside of that we'll have our first carousel item, which will contain our carousel or image slider image. So we'll add .carousel-item, and the first one is always going to be active. So similar to the navigation, we'll use the active class, and then inside of that we'll have our image. So I'll just write img. Then if we hit enter, we'll have the carousel inner, carousel item, and the image inside of it. And I'm just going to space out the carousel item from the carousel inner div because we're going to have multiple carousel items, and I'll drop the closing div for that on a new line. Then for our first image, this is going to be img / then the carousel folder and 1.jpg. So now if we take a look in Google Chrome, we'll see that we have the image, but it's taking up a lot of space. It's displaying at its full size. So to contain the image, we can use a width class. So for example, with w-25, the image will take up 25% of its parent element, or 50%, and we'll just use 100. So it has a max width of 100% of its parent element. So before we start adding the content on top of our image slider, let's add the rest of the images and get our previous and next buttons in there. So I'm just going to copy this first carousel item and then paste it underneath it twice. And we'll need to get rid of the active classes on the second and third ones. And I'll just change the images to 2 and 3. So now if we save the image slider, we're not going to see the other slides yet because we need to add a data interval. So for example, if we just add 100, it's going to be really quick at 1/10 of a second, or we could add 500 for half a second. But I think it looks good over 5,000 or 5 seconds with the interval in between slides. So the duration in between the slide transitions that I tend to like is 6,500 or 6.5 seconds. So I'm just going to change it to that here. And we're also going to customize the transition speed once we get over to style.css. But for now, so the image slider isn't always going in the background, I'm just going to add a couple of zeros to the end so it doesn't slide at all for now. So now that we have our slide set up, let's add our previous and next buttons, which will be these icons on the left and right. So what we're going to do is drop down to the comment where it says previous and next buttons, and we're going to add a link with a class called carousel-control-prev or PERV. Then inside of this, we're going to have a span tag, which is where we'll add our previous and next arrow icons. So for now, I'm just going to drop the span tag down to a new line, and let's go get the class for the icon that we want. So if we go back over to Font Awesome, which we covered at the beginning of the video, we can just type in PREV and we'll get all of the previous arrows. And I'm just going to pick this one down here called chevron-left. So all we'll need from this Font Awesome icon are the classes, but what we can do is just paste it in and then delete everything but the classes inside of the I tag. And then make sure that you have the closing quote. So right now, if we go over to Google Chrome and take a look at the image slider, we're not going to see the previous button just yet because we'll need to add the ID for the carousel to the link. So I'll add the hashtag for the ID, and this, if you remember, is going to be the carousel ID right here. So we'll just add carousel after the hashtag. Then we'll also need to specify a role for the link. So we're just going to say role equals button. And then we'll use data-slide prev or PERV. So the JavaScript feature with Bootstrap knows to go to the previous slide. So now if we save it and take a look at Chrome, we'll be able to see the link here, or the icon I should say, but it's rather small. So what we'll do is we're just going to use Font Awesome's class FA-2X to make the icon twice the size. Okay, so now let's go back over and we can just copy this and paste it for our next icon or button. And we'll just need to change a couple of things. So we'll just change the data slide to next, the class to next here for the control, and then the icon to right instead of left. So now if we go back to Google Chrome, we'll have our previous and next buttons all set up for our image slider. Now let's continue our carousel image slider development with some style, followed by adding our content on top of it. So the first thing that we'll do is let's go up to the carousel ID right here, and we're going to reference that ID to give the box shadow to the bottom of the carousel image slider, similar to the bottom of the navigation that we added. So over in style.css, let's go down to the carousel comment, and I'm just going to write hashtag carousel for the ID. And we can take the same box shadow styling from the navigation and we'll paste that into our carousel style declaration. And I'm just going to change the vertical offset and the blur offset to 1 rem from 0.5 rem. So now that our box shadow is set, the next thing that we're going to do is over in index.html, we'll be targeting the class carousel-inner. So with the website we've been developing, if we flex the window up, we'll see that the image carousel is going to keep flexing to its full height and width. But with the finished version, we're going to have a max height set, so it doesn't span any further down the page when we go to a wider screen width. So we're going to target that carousel-inner class, and we're going to give this a max height. So I'm just going to reference the class here with carousel-inner and give it a max height of 38 rem, and then we're going to say exclamation point important, so it overrides height CSS already added to the Bootstrap carousel. So now if we flex the window up and down, we'll see that it's going to have that max height at the 38 rem mark. So now that that's set, let's adjust the transition speed to and from the slide. So the inherent speed with Bootstrap is pretty fast, as you can see here, and we're going to reduce that speed or make it a longer transition. So to do that, we'll need to target Bootstrap classes that aren't seen here. So basically we're going to be targeting the carousel item, but the previous and next class for that, as well as the active class. So we're going to say carousel-item-next, and then we'll add a comma, followed by carousel-item previous. And then the last one that we'll target is carousel-item.active for the first carousel item. And we're going to give this a style of transition, transform, and we're going to start off with 0.2 seconds ease so you can see the speed. And this is going to be super fast. As you can see right here, you almost can't see the transition. So just as an example, we'll just say 2.2 seconds ease, but the speed that I like is 1.2 seconds, which is a nice balanced transition speed. So I'll leave the speed up to you. If you're making a website for older folks, you might want to go with a longer transition, and for younger people, you can go a little bit faster. So now that all of our carousel items are set up with our images, let's start adding our content on top of the first carousel item or the first image. So what we're going to do is we're going to start adding the background color and the Bootstrap text that's on the first slide. So I'm going to drop down underneath the image and add a class called carousel-caption. And then inside of that, we're going to add a container class to set a max width for our content on top of the carousel slider. And with the carousel caption class, as we'll see here with some test text, we're going to be able to place content directly on top of the image. So let's start our content off with a div class row with Bootstrap, which will contain our columns. And to center the column, since it's not going to take up the full width of the screen, we're going to use a Bootstrap class called justify content-center. Then inside of that, we'll have our column. So we're going to use a column which will take up 8 out of the 12 available columns to us, at least for now, before we add some customizations to the columns with how they transition to different widths. And inside of that column for now, we'll just add a heading 1. So I'm just going to type out Bootstrap for the main heading text on the page. And there we see our Bootstrap text down at the bottom of the screen. Now let's add the border that appears underneath the heading. So with Bootstrap, we can use classes for this. We're just going to add border-top and then border-primary, which is a class which will give us a blue shade. And we'll give this a width of 50% of the column that it's inside of with W50. Then let's add our heading 3 text underneath it where it says complete website design. So I'll just write H3 and then complete website design. And we'll come back to add some additional styling to this. But first let's lay out our buttons. So the first button that we're going to be adding is the red one. And if we go over to buttons in Bootstrap, we'll see blue for primary, and we'll see danger for the red button right here. So we're going to reference those classes. So we can use an A tag for a link instead of the button tag here. And we'll just say a.btn.btn-danger for the red color. And then we'll need to specify a size. So we'll say btn-lg, which is the large version of the button. And I'm just going to leave the link blank with a hashtag. But if you are making a multi-page website, like the agency theme, for example, you can link to a different HTML page. And I'm just going to write view demo in here for the text inside of the red button. And what we can do is we can just copy this and paste it underneath to add our primary button. So I'll just change this to primary and the text to start now. All right, so now if we save it and take a look in Chrome, we'll see our headings, the primary border, and the buttons underneath. So now let's continue laying out the content on top of our image slider, and then we'll go about styling our content. So before we actually add any more content on top of our carousel images, let's go about centering the content on top of the image using the carousel caption class. So I'm just going to copy this class and go over to style.css, and then we can add it here with the period for the class. And what we're going to do is we're going to give it a position of absolute so we can place it wherever we want on the page. And then we're going to say top 54%. So it's 54% from the top of the element that it's inside of. And then once we do that, we're also going to make it so the element is in the middle of that top 52% mark instead of just beneath it. So we'll just add transform, translate Y, and then in parentheses, negative 50%. So the element will be in the middle of that top 54% mark. So now if we go back, it's going to be nice and centered for us. So one other thing that we'll add here is all of our text is going to be uppercase throughout the 3 different slides. So I'm just going to write text transform uppercase here to apply that to all of our content inside of the carousel caption. But you can change that or leave it out if you don't want all of your text uppercase. Now let's add the custom background shade that's transparent that the first slide as well as the others have. So we're just going to make up our own class for this. And I'm going to add that class to the parent element of our content along with the col-8. And I'm just going to call that bg-custom. So let's go style it in style.css with the bg-custom class. And we're going to give it a transparent black background color using the RGBA values. So I'll just add 000 for black, and we're going to give it a 0.4 or 40% transparency. Then let's make all of our text inside of it the color white. And we're also going to give this a border radius of 1 rem all around to have nice rounded corners. So now if we go back after saving it, it's going to start to take shape. But before we do any more styling or add any more content, let's adjust the class along with the col-8 so we can remove the content once we get down to a certain screen width, as you see right here. So later I'm going to show you how we can customize this at a smaller screen width, but for now, we're just going to add D none or display none. So by default, it's not going to display at all until we get up to the large screen width. So we're just going to write D-LG-block. So we'll change it from display none to display block at that 992 pixel width. But you could also have it be removed at the medium screen width, for example. And later in the video, when we get to our media queries, you can add more styling at the smaller screen widths. But for now, I'll just leave it at the large screen. So next, let's space out the elements here inside of the BG custom class to make it match the spacing of the original. So we're going to use classes from Bootstrap to apply the padding. So the first one we're going to add is py-3, which is going to give it a vertical padding on the top and bottom of 1.5 rem. So if we just look at the utilities here in Bootstrap, we can see we can add padding or margin top, bottom, left, right, and the values, as you can see here, are from 0.25 rem all the way up to 3 rem with using the values 1 through 5. So P-1 to P-5 or M-1 to M-5 for margin. So moving back over to index.html, I'm also going to remove any horizontal margin with MX-0 from this column, so our content and background color can take up more space. And now that we've done that, let's center the border or border primary by using a class called mx-auto, which is the equivalent of margin 0 auto in CSS. And then I'm also going to add my-3 to add vertical padding on both sides of 1.5 rem. Then the last spacing class I'm going to add is padding bottom 3 to add 1 rem of padding bottom to our heading 3. So now we're ready to add some individual style to our headings and buttons. So first let's start with the heading 1, which we'll reference by targeting the Carousel caption class and then h1. So I'll add carousel caption, heading 1, and let's increase the font size to 3.8 rem. And we're also going to give this a text shadow. So I'll just write text-shadow, and we can use the same RGBA value here from the box shadow. And then we're going to change it to 1 from the 0.1 opacity with the alpha value. Then let's make the blur radius 0.3 rem, and both the horizontal and vertical offset just 0.1 rem. So then I'll just add point here to the front of this and then save it. And now we'll have a nice shadow effect to our Bootstrap text, which will make it stand out more with the transparent black background without making that background color too dark. So now let's add some custom style to the border primary border with the Bootstrap framework. So we'll just want to reference that class right here where it says border-primary. And all we'll need to do is add a border top style declaration. So I'm just going to write border-top 0.2 rem solid, and then we'll use that blue hex value that we've used before, which is the value #4981b3. And then we'll need to write exclamation point important to override the styling that that class already has with Bootstrap. So now if we take a look, we'll be matching up with the original version pretty well until we get down to the heading 3 text. So to style that, we can just copy the heading 1 style, and I'm going to change the font size to 2.2 rem, and then let's just reduce the blur radius to 0.2 rem, and we'll leave everything else the same. And now if we take a look at it, that's going to have the nice text shadow as well. And whoops, I misspelled the website text, so I'll just change that. So now we're ready to add our custom styling to the Bootstrap button. So to target both buttons at once, what we can do is target the btn-lg class, and then we can use the btn danger and primary afterwards. So let's say btn-lg, and let's remove the border radius with border radius 0. And we're going to make the text uppercase for these buttons as well as other ones on the page, even though we already have them uppercase with the carousel caption text being uppercase. So this will affect the other large buttons that we use throughout the page, which will be the pills and then the contact us, as well as the agency theme button at the very bottom. And the 3-column section buttons will be medium-sized buttons. But if you wanted to add this style for medium size, you can just add comma and then btn-md if you wanted the border radius removed and the uppercase characters. So let's also reduce the font size slightly with the btnlg to font size 1 rem. And then the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to increase the border width. So you won't be able to see the border width unless we're looking at the agency theme button on the page right here. But inherently, we're going to have this tiny border width with all Bootstrap buttons. So let's increase that and we'll just say border width medium. And that's all the style that we're going to add to the btnlg class. So now let's go about changing the colors of our buttons. So the first one that will change will be the red button, which is the btn-danger class right here. So I'll just copy that so we can reference it. And we're going to change the background color. So we'll say background color, and we're going to give it a hex value of AC2615, which is a red that has a little bit more black or purple in it because it's a darker shade. And then we'll also need to change the border color because right now the border, as you can see, is still going to have that lighter red. So we'll say border 0.05 rem solid, and then we'll use that same hex value, the AC2615. So now it's going to be that full red color, and we're not going to change the hover color. I think it looks fine hovering over it and getting that lighter blue shade. But with the BTN primary shade, or button rather, we'll change the regular color and the hover state. So let's change the color to the 498 1B3 shade that we've been using. And then we'll also need to do that for the border. And now we'll have the nice blue shade to match the background of the image slider image as well as the top bar, but we'll also want to change the hover and actually the focus state of the button. So let's add btn primary and then the hover pseudo class. And let me just show you how it's going to look if we only change the hover for now. So I'm going to make this the color 68A0 or 0D2 for both the background color and the border. And then what we're going to need to do is change the focus state because as you can see when we click it, it's going to give us the border. So I'll just copy btn primary hover and add a comma, and then we'll change the pseudo class to focus. And now if we save it and go back and click on it, it's going to give us a border still. So we'll just add exclamation point important for both the background color and the border to override their styling. I think that's just the Chrome's highlight around it actually. So that looks good. So the last thing that we'll do with the buttons is let's add a little space in between them. So I'm going to apply some margin right to the BTN danger button of 0.5 rem with MR2 and then margin left 0.5 rem with ML2 to the start now button. So now we're pretty much matching the original, except for there's a little bit of a spacing difference. So maybe if we change this to 0.5 rem, or 0.05 rem rather, and this one to 0.05 rem, it'll match. And that's pretty close. So the border for the BTN danger is also going to need to be 0.05 rem. Okay, so now when we transition back and forth, we can't tell the difference and it matches the original. So now let's get our content set up on the other slides. So since we laid out all of the HTML already for the first slide, in order to populate the content on the second slide, we can just copy this carousel caption div class entirely, and I'm just going to paste that in underneath the image here. And then we can start adjusting the HTML. So instead of having the content centered, we're going to have that off to the right. So I'm going to change this to justify content end instead of center. So that's going to pull our column off to the right. And then I'm going to delete some of this stuff. So let's delete the border and the heading 1. And for now, I'll also delete the buttons, and we're going to add a paragraph section. So we're going to say p.lead, and lead is a class with Bootstrap, which will use our 300 font weight that we got from Google Font. So that's a lighter font weight than the regular 400 font weight. And then I'm just going to grab this text right here. So you can type this out or write lorem for dummy text in Visual Studio Code. And I'm also going to delete the heading 3, and then I'll need to grab a red button. So I'll just add the danger button from up here and paste that in underneath the paragraph text. And I'll change the text to see phone to match the finished version. And I can do away with the margin right as well. So now if we take a look at it here, we'll see that it's starting to look pretty good, but it's too wide a column. So let's reduce this to col-5. And then we'll also want our text to be off to the right instead of centered to match the finished version. So I'm going to add the class text-right to the column as well, or to the row rather. So we'll just add text-right. And once we've done that, let's save it and see where we're at. It looks good except for the spacing. So let's add some padding right to the column of 1 rem with PR3. And then there's a little bit more space underneath the paragraph text. So let's just add PB-3 here for padding bottom 1 rem. And now if we were to toggle back and forth, it's pretty close. That's close enough for me. You can mess around with the padding if you want slightly. I'm going to move over to the last slide. So for the last slide, I'm going to grab the HTML from the first slide actually because it has the larger heading in it, and I'll paste that in underneath the image. And once this is pasted in, I have an extra div here, or I'm missing a class. We'll see in a second. I'm just going to get rid of the heading 1 and then the border. And then for the heading 3 class, we can change that to built for tablets. And then we'll change the column to col-7 and justify-content start instead of center. And I'm just going to get rid of the red button. And then let's add our paragraph text with that same p.lead class. And I'll just copy the paragraph text from the finished version and paste that in. Then I'm going to add text-left to have the text positioned off to the left. And now let's save it and see where we ended up here. So I'll go to the third slide and we got nothing. So I'm missing the container caption, or carousel caption class rather. So I'll just add that in and move the closing div to underneath this div, and then I'm just going to indent this over. So now if we save it and take a look, let's see where we're at. So that's looking pretty good except for the spacing off to the left. So I'm going to add some padding left to the column. So I'll just add PL-3. And now if we take a look, it should match up to the original. So pretty good. I think that the spacing is slightly off. The ML2 class, that's what it is here with the button I can get rid of. And now we should be matched up pretty good. Okay, so that's all for the HTML and CSS for our image slider. Now let's drop down underneath the image slider and add our heading text as well as the 3-column section. So let's get started with the built with ease text that we see right here, as well as the border and the paragraph text underneath it. So we're going to drop down to the main page heading HTML comment, and I'm going to add a div class called col-12, which as we know from earlier will take up the full width of the screen. So I'll add class col-12, and then I'm also going to add text-center and margin top 5, which will give us a margin top of 3 rem above the built with ease text. Then underneath that, once we hit enter, we're going to add our heading 1, and we'll use a class called text-dark to give us the black text, which is darker than the text color that we added for our body, or that was already included for us with the starter files. And then I'm also going to add padding top 4. Then we can write the built with ease text. So then when we save and take a look at it in Chrome, we'll already see the styling with the dark text color as well as the spacing that we want. So let's drop down under that and add our border, which is going to be the same blue border that we used previously for the image slider. So I'm just going to go up and grab the HTML for that with the border top and bordered primary classes. Then once we paste it in, the only thing that we'll need to change, as you can see here, is going to be the width. So let's change it from W50 to W25 for 25% of the page's width. And now we're ready to add our paragraph text. So I'm just going to copy this text right here, and then we'll use the paragraph lead class, and then I'll paste in the text. And now if we take a look, we'll have our heading, border, and then the paragraph text. And so we're not looking at the very bottom of the screen. I'm just going to add some space down here. So I'll just add a container class or whatever class we want, and then I'll add my-5, which will give us a couple of rem of space underneath that text. Now that our heading is all set, let's drop down to the 3-column section. So we're going to use a container class similar to what we used previously once we locate the 3-column section HTML comment here. So I'm just going to write container for the class, and then inside of that we'll have our row class, and I'm going to give the row some vertical margin of 3 rem on either side with my-5. Then for the 3-column section, if we divide 3 into 12, we get 4, and we're going to have it transition at the medium screen breakpoint, or 768 pixels. So we're going to add the class col-md for the 768 pixels -4 because we want to use up 4 out of the 12 available columns. Then I'm going to also add some vertical margin of my-4 or 1.5 rem top bottom. Then for the start of our content, let's add our image first. So we're going to add image, and we're going to give this that W-100 class so it takes up and stays within the column at 100% of the width. And then the actual image is going to be img/1.jpg. So now that our image is set, let's add the heading that appears underneath it. So we're going to use a heading 4 tag to add this text. And then we're also going to give this a class called my-4, similar to what we used to the column, to give it a margin top bottom of 1.5 rem. And I'm just going to paste in the text here. And now we're ready for the paragraph text underneath that. And we'll just use a plain p tag for the paragraph text. We're not going to use the lead class in this case. Then for our button, we're going to use a class called btn-outline-dark instead of btn primary or btn danger. And then as we know from earlier, we're going to use the btn-md class for the medium-sized button instead of large. So I'll just enter that, and I'm going to leave this blank with a hashtag and just write our story as the text inside of the button. So now that we have our first column completed, let's go over and take a look at the other two. So everything is going to be the same here. This is going to be the easiest part of the website. So what we'll do is we're just going to copy the column inside of here, and I'm just going to add some space to separate them. And then we can paste that in, and all we'll need to change is the image once we do that to 2.jpg and 3.jpg. And now if we save it, we'll have all 3 of our columns set up, as you can see here. Now let's move down the page and set up the fixed background image scrolling section. So first, let's go back over to index.html and locate the comment where we'll add our HTML for the fixed background image section. So this, you'll notice, is going to be below the emoji HTML comment, and we'll come back to that in just a little while. But first, I want to get the background image set up. So you might remember from the beginning of the video that we have 3 classes already styled for us at the bottom of style.css for the fixed background image. So let's go ahead and reference those same classes in our HTML here. So I'm going to write our first class, which is fixed-background. Then inside of that, we'll have a class called fixed-wrap, followed by a class called fixed inside of the fixed-wrap class, as well as its parent class, fixed background. So now that we have our classes set up, I'm going to add some space underneath the fixed background class at the top, and that's where we'll add our content that'll sit on top of the fixed background image. But first, what we'll want to do is add the actual background image, which will use the fixed class. So in style.css, I'll write .fixed, and then we're going to add our background image. So I'll write background image, and then URL, and in parentheses and a single quote will reference the image. So with our background image for the fixed background section, we'll need to reverse out of the CSS folder first before we can go into the image folder. So we'll need to write period, period, / and then img, and then we can reach the matrix.jpg image. So now that we have our background image added, if we go over to Google Chrome, we're not going to see it just yet because we need some space or content in order for it to display. So what we'll do is we're going to reference the parent class to the fixed and fixed wrap classes. So that's going to be the fixed background class that we see right here, which we'll be adding the content inside of. But for now, we can just add some padding. So we're just going to write padding, 10 rem top bottom, and 0 left right. So now if we take a look at Google Chrome, we'll see that we have the image showing up, but it's not fixed. So what we'll need to do is just simply add position fixed to the fixed class. And then if we take a look at it and scroll up and down, we'll see that it's taking on the fixed positioning. So now let's start to add the content on top of the fixed background image with the headings as well as the 2 buttons underneath. So let's go locate the fixed background class because we'll want to add our HTML for the row that will contain our headings and buttons inside of that. So let's start off with the row class, and then we're going to use Bootstrap's text light class to make the text white in color. Then let's also add some padding to the top and bottom with py-5, which will give us 3 rem to the top and bottom. Then inside of that, let's add a full width column with col-12. So now we're ready to start adding our content inside of the column. So the first bit of content we'll lay out will be our heading 1, and that's going to be for the advance to the next level text. So let me just make sure that that turns into a heading 1, and then I'm going to copy the advance to the next level text instead of typing it out, and I'll just paste that in the heading 1 tag. And now if we go over, we'll start to see our text show up, but it's positioned off to the left. So let's just add text-center alongside our column class. And now we're ready to add our heading 3 underneath it where it says, see what's on the other side. So I'll just copy that text and let's add our heading 3. And I'm also going to add some padding to the top and bottom with py-4. And once I paste in the text and correct the ... at the beginning, let's go over to Google Chrome. And there we have our 2 headings. So now let's add the blue and red pill buttons. So we can just take the buttons from the image slider instead of typing out this HTML again. So I'm just going to copy the HTML from the first slide. And once we paste them in, the arrangement of them here is different. So we're going to have the blue pill first instead of the red pill. So I'll just copy the red pill and then delete that and paste it underneath the blue pill. And we'll also just need to adjust the margin. So for the red button, we'll have ML2 for margin left 2, and then blue will have MR2. Okay, so now the placement should be good if we take a look at it. And lastly, let's just change our text to blue pill, followed by red pill. And once this is complete, we're going to come back to these buttons and make them into the buttons that will operate the pop-up modal. So now let's go ahead and add the Bootstrap modal pop-up using the blue and red pill buttons. So if you'd like to learn more about the Bootstrap modal pop-up than what we're going to cover here in the HTML, you can go over to the Get Bootstrap documentation and just do a search for modal, and then you'll be able to see the different effects that they have. So with modal, instead of adding an image that will pop up, you can add messages that have buttons, as you see right here, and you can also add Bootstrap rows and columns to modals if you want. So in order to get our buttons here to interact with the modal, what we'll need to do is change these links to a button tag instead of the anchor text tag with the A. So I'm just going to change all of these A's to the button tag. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both instances of the hypertext reference here and the button. So I'll just add the class and the button to make sure that I'm only selecting both right here and nothing else on the page. And I'm going to delete this and then add type button, and then we'll just add data-toggle modal instead of collapse, if you remember from the navigation. And then we'll need to add a target for the modal. So this is going to be the ID that we'll give our modal, and I'll just call it modal1 after the hashtag. Okay, so now our buttons are ready to link to our modal and get it to display when we click on them. So let's add the modal effect with the GIF, and we're going to navigate down to the modal pop-up HTML comment to do that. So we're going to add a class called modal, and then we'll also add a class called fade to get the fade effect from the Bootstrap library. And then we'll also need to add our ID, which is going to be the modal1 ID. So I'll just write hashtag modal1, and then inside of that we'll have a class that's called modal-dialog, followed by the image that's inside of it. And we'll give this image a class of w-100 to take up 100% of the modal dialog window. So now we're ready for our image, and I'm just going to hit Command B to open up the sidebar or Explorer, and this is going to be inside of the emoji folder, and you can pick whatever emoji GIF you want, but I'm just going to pick, as you know, the poo emoji. So I'll just write img/emoji and then poo. Alright, so now we can go ahead and save this and check out Google Chrome. And as you can see, now we have our emoji GIF popping up with the modal effect using both buttons. Now let's add our emoji navbar collapse feature with the drop-down GIFs. So let's start laying out the HTML for the first gradient navbar. So we'll want to go up to the first emoji navbar HTML comment here, and we'll start with the navbar class, followed by the bg-primary class, which will give us a blue background. And we're also going to make the navbar sticky, but it's not going to stick over top of the fixed background image because we would need to add some positive z index to get it on top of the fixed background. But let's just add the sticky top class. And then I'm also going to add a non-Bootstrap class called Emoji. And later we'll use this class to style the plug icon that's used in the second navbar. Then one correction that we're going to make is let's actually make this whole navbar a link. So we're going to use the A tag, and then we'll add a hypertext reference to open up the emoji ID that we're going to give the collapsible feature attached to the navbar further down the page. Then to open up the collapsible feature further down the page, let's add roll button and data-toggle collapse, similar to the main navigation. Okay, so once we have this filled out and we save it, let's take a look at Google Chrome, and there we'll have our blue primary navigation bar. And when we hover over it, you'll see that it's a link and ready to link to the collapsible feature that we'll add. But first, let's just copy this navigation and paste it in for the second emoji bar navigation below. And for our second nav bar, we're going to add an icon. So I'm going to use the plug icon from Font Awesome, but you can use whatever you want. So I'm going to do a search for the plug icon here by just saying plug, and that's going to be the very first one on the top left. So I'll select that and then just copy the HTML for it. Then to add the icon to the navbar, all we have to do is paste in the HTML in between the A tags. So now if we save it and take a look, it's going to be kind of tough to see the actual icon because it's going to have a blue link shade behind the blue navbar color. So let's go over to style.css, and we're going to use the emoji class that we gave the navbar to add some custom styling to it before we style the plug and make it larger. So for reference, that'll be the emoji class that we see right here. So I'm just going to write period emoji for the class, and let's give it its gradient background. So we're going to use background image for that, and then we'll add linear gradient, and in parentheses, since we're going to be going from left to right, we'll say to right. Then the gradient colors that we're going to use are going to be the same shades as the blue and red buttons or pills. So let's add the blue hex value, which is 4981B3. Then add a comma, and we'll add the red value, which is AC2615. So now if we save it, we'll have our left to right gradient, as you can see here. And next, let's adjust the height of the navbar. So we're going to do away with a inherent minimum height value that the navbar has by adding min height 0, and I'm going to add exclamation point important, and that's going to reduce the height slightly, but then to customize it to this even lower height, what we can do is we can adjust the padding. So let's add padding, 0.4 rem top bottom, and I'll add exclamation point important here as well. And now if we save it, we should have the height of the top bar at least matching the original, but you can adjust it if you want to make it larger or smaller. And you can also add your own icons to the top bar in addition to the bottom if you want. So now let's go about styling the icon on the bottom. And to do this, we could target the fa-plug class directly, but if we wanted to style all Font Awesome icons, we can select the element and look for the svg-inline-fa class. So that's what I'm going to use here, targeting it inside of the Emoji class. So I'll write the Emoji class and then paste in the Font Awesome class. And the first thing that we'll do is let's center it with margin 0 auto. And let's also change the color to white so we can see it with the blue and red background. So now if we save it, we'll have our icon displaying in the center, but it's still kind of small. So let's just change the sizing here with font size 2 rem. All right, so now if we take a look at it, we'll have our plug icon all set up in the bottom navbar, and we're ready to start adding the 4-column section of the emojis from the original, which open and collapse. So we're going to add this underneath the second navbar by just adding a little bit of space underneath that HTML. And then we're going to start this off with the emoji ID. So I'm going to write hashtag emoji. And then inside of that, we'll have a container followed by a row. And then each one of the columns here are going to make a transition at the small screen width followed by the medium screen width. So in the small screen, we're going to go from the single column width up to the small screen width with 2 columns. So that'll be col SM-6 at the 576 pixel mark, which you see right here. Then once we get up to 768 pixels, it's going to change into the 4-column layout. So we'll want to use the MD class for that with col-md-3 because 3 goes into 12 4 times for the 4 columns. Then each column will have an image inside of it with the class w-100 for width 100. And let's add our first image, which will be the panda GIF with img/emoji/panda.gif. And to test to make sure that the collapse feature works, before we add any more of our GIFs, let's add the collapse class to the navigation. So Bootstrap knows to open and collapse it when we click on either one of the navigation links. Okay, so now when we save it, if we click on either one of the top or bottom nav bars, it's going to open and close our emoji ID containing the container, row, and the 4 columns. So let's add the rest of our GIFs here. So I'm going to fly through this and add the poo, the unicorn, and then the chicken last. So now if we take a look at the version we're working on and we click on the navbar, there we have all 4 of our GIF columns, which are going to go from the single column width up to the 2 column width, and then the 4 column layout. Now let's add our 2 column section and the Jumbotron section before our footer. So for our 2 column section, it's going to transform into the single column layout at the 992 pixel mark. But before we add the column class, let's get started with our container. So I'm going to write container, and then let's add some margin to the top and bottom of 3 rem with my-5. Then we'll add our row class, and I'm also going to add margin of 1.5 rem top bottom to the row with py-4. So for our first column, we're going to have that take up 1/3 of the width, and then our second column will be 2/3. So that's going to be 4 out of the 12 available columns, and we're going to transform it, as I said, at the large screen width of 992. So let's say col-lg-4, and then we're going to want some margin to the bottom of this for when the columns are stacked, so the button isn't too close to the image. So let's add mb-4 for margin bottom 1.5 rem. And then when we get up to the large screen width, we're going to have the margin top bottom set to auto. That way the column will center itself inside of the column vertically. So the margin will change at the large screen width to auto with MYLG-auto, and that'll do away with the margin bottom -4 once we get up to the 992 pixel mark. And then inside of that, let's add the heading 1. And similar to the heading that we added towards the top of our website, we're going to give this the text-dark class to give it the black color instead of the dark gray shade that we added to the body. Then let's also add font weight bold to make our text bold, and I'm going to add some margin to the bottom of the heading 1 with MB-3 for 1 rem margin bottom. All right, and then for the text, I'm just going to copy the "we've been expecting you" heading here and paste that in. So now if we go over to the version we're working on, there we have our heading, and if we flex down the page at the 992 pixel breakpoint, it's going to turn into the single column width. So let's add the paragraph text underneath that. And I'm also going to add some margin bottom to our paragraph of 1.5 rem with MB-4. And then I'll paste in the text. And now we can add the button where it says agency theme. So we're going to use the BTN-outline dark button, similar to what we used with the medium buttons before, but we're going to use that same large button from the slider and the fixed background image. And then to promote the agency theme and the bundle pack of complete websites on my website, w3newbie.com, I'll add my link to w3newbie.com/themes. And to open up the link in a new tab, I'm going to add target equals _blank in quotations. Then of course for the text, I'll write the agency theme, which will already be capitalized for us because of the style we added to the large buttons earlier in the video. So now that our first column is set, let's move over to our second column with the image off to the right. And as I said, that's going to take up 2/3 of the page. So we're going to use the leftover columns, which will be 8. So let's add col-lg-8, and then inside of that we'll have our image, and we're going to give this a class w-100. Then the image is img/code.jpg. Okay, so now if we save it and go over to Chrome, we have our 2-column section complete with it making its responsive transformation at the 992 pixel mark. So let's drop down to the Jumbotron section underneath that. So if you're unfamiliar with Jumbotrons, we can just take a look at it in the Bootstrap documentation. And this is going to be a class that gives us the dark background with the gray shade. And it's also going to add a lot of padding around that for us. So we're going to be reducing the padding of it and removing some margin from the bottom. So let's add the Jumbotron class here, and then we're going to add py-5, so the margin on the top bottom is only 3 rem instead of 4 or 5, whatever it is inherently. And then we're going to add mb-0 to remove the margin on the bottom. Then inside of the Jumbotron we'll have our container class, which will be followed by the row class inside of that. And I'm going to hit enter to add the first column separate from this because we're going to have a couple of different breakpoints for the text inside of the Jumbotron that we see right here. So if I flex the window down, we're going to see it transform a few different times before it gets down to the single column width here. So at the medium screen width, we're going to go up to 7 out of the 12 pixels. So let's add col-md-7, and then once we get up to the large screen width, we're going to have it at 8 out of the 12 columns. So we'll add col-lg-8 for the 992 pixel mark. Then at the extra large screen width, or 1200 pixels, we're going to have it take up 9 out of the 12 columns. Then finally, we're going to center it on the screen so it lines up with the button vertically, similar to what we did with the 2-column text using my-auto. And then I'll hit enter and we can add our heading 4 inside of that with the looking for quality web development and design services text. Okay, so now that that's set, let's use up the remaining columns for the button that will start out underneath it and then will go up next to it at the medium screen width. Okay, so let's start with the medium screen size, as I said, using up the remaining columns. So we'll add col-md-5 and then col-lg-4 followed by xl-3. And for the button, we can copy a primary button from earlier, or we can just type it out with a btn, then btn primary, and btn lg. And I'll just type in the text "contact us today" with the blank hashtag link set. Okay, so now if we save it and take a look in Chrome, let's see where we're at. So looks pretty good, except for there's kind of no space above the button on the smallest screen width underneath 768. So let's add some padding to the top of the button of 1.5 rem with pt-4. And then when we get up to the medium screen width, we'll want to do away with the padding to make sure that the button is in line with the text next to it with pt-md-0. Okay, so that should look good, and now our 2-column and Jumbotron sections are all set. Now let's drop down to the bottom of the website and lay out our footer and socket section HTML. So let's move back over to index.html and drop down to the footer comment. And the first thing we'll do is we're going to add a tag for the black background that we're seeing. So I'm just going to use the HTML5 footer tag. And then inside of that, we'll have our container followed by our row inside of that. And then we're going to give this row a class called text-light for the light text on top of the black background. And we'll also center our text. And then we'll want some padding on the top and bottom. So let's give it a padding of 1.5 rem top bottom with py-4. Then if we take a look at the footer, we're going to have a column that doesn't take up the full width. So to center it, let's use the class justifyContentCenter, just like what we used for the image slider. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter and then add some space, and the column that will contain our content, we're going to try to keep it the same width as we flex up the screen. So once we get up to the 576 pixel mark, we're going to use up 10 out of the 12 available columns. So let's add col-sm-10. Then once we get up to the medium screen width at 768, it's hard to see that it made a shift there, but we're going to use 8 out of the 12 columns with col-md8. Then the last transition will be at the large screen width, where we'll go up to 6 out of the 12 columns. So that's col-lg6. And then the first bit of content will be our image for the logo. So we'll just add image. And I'm going to drop that down to a new line here. And the image source is going to be the logo, but it's going to be the white version. So it'll be img/logo-white.png. Then once we have that added, let's drop down and add the paragraph text that's underneath it. And we'll just use the plain p tag. So I'll copy this text. You could use the lorem text if you want. And now if we take a look at it in Google Chrome, since we have the text light class, we're not going to be able to see anything yet and with the white logo. So I'm just going to add the class bg-dark to give us a dark background with Bootstrap. So next, let's add the social media icons underneath the paragraph text. And we're going to put those inside of an unordered list, displaying each one inside of a list item similar to a navigation. So we'll add UL, and I'm going to give this a class called social. Then let's also add some padding to the top of it to separate it from the paragraph text with pt-3. Then inside of the unordered list, we'll have our list items, and we're going to have 4, so I'll add *4. Then inside of each list item, we'll have a link, which will contain our font awesome icons, and each one will start with the I tag followed by the class FAB and the class FA-. Then we'll be able to add our social media network icon classes to that. But before we finish the icon classes, I'm going to select all instances of this with Shift-Command-L on my Mac, and I'm just going to add target_blank. So all of the social media icon links open up in a new tab when they're clicked on. So now to fill out the links, you can add your social media pages if you want. I'm just going to copy my links here real quick for Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then of course my YouTube page. And then for the Font Awesome icons, we'll add, for the first one, it's going to be FA-Facebook. And then if I go down here, there we have the Facebook icon, and then FA-Twitter, FA-Instagram, and then FA-YouTube. And you can always check Font Awesome for different styled icons for the social media websites. So now for our last bit of HTML for the design, let's drop down and add the Socket HTML, which is a little section at the very bottom of the website. So we're going to say div class Socket, which is a non-Bootstrap class that we'll add, and we're going to make our text white in color. So let's add the text light class as well as text center, and I'm going to add some vertical padding of 1 rem top bottom with py-3. Then inside of that, we'll have a paragraph tag with the copyright symbol, which is ampersand copy semicolon. Then for the link, we'll have our anchor text a tag, and I'm going to add a link to my web page, which is https://w3newbie.com, and then I'll just add the link text w3newbie.com. So now if we take a look in Google Chrome, we'll see our W3Newbie text with the link, and then it's hard to see, but we have the white copyright symbol, and that'll show up better once we add the background color to the socket section. Then one other thing that I'm going to add will just be to open that link up in a new tab with target_blank. Now let's add our CSS styling to the footer and socket sections. So first, let's remove that bg-dark class that we added to the container, and we're going to add a custom background color to the footer tag itself, so it'll take up the full width of the page. So let's reference that footer tag, and I'm going to add background color 383838, which is a dark gray hex value, as you can see there. So next, let's add some padding all around the footer. So we're going to add some padding to the top and bottom, and then the left and right, so the text doesn't get too close to the edges on the smallest screens. So let's add padding 1 rem top, 2 rem left right, and then 3 rem bottom. Then once we've done that, let's resize the logo. So we're going to reference that image inside of the footer tag with footer image, and let's give it a height of 3.5 rem, and let's also add margin 1.5 rem top bottom to space it out from the paragraph text as well as the top of the footer section, and then we'll also add auto just to keep it centered. Then before we add our social media icon styling, let's just change the color to white. So we're basically just going to make all of our footer links white in color, which will include or can include the social media icons as well as the link at the bottom of the screen. So let's just target the paragraph text, the links, and then I'm just going to say color white, and then text decoration none. And then I'll also need to reference the socket link separately because that's going to be inside of the socket class instead of the footer. So I'll write socket or socket class and then A for the link. And now we're going to have that white text, which we're not going to see for a little bit because let's style the social media icons before we get down to the socket. So we'll need to reference that social class that we gave to our unordered list first. So I'm going to write ul.social, and then let's remove the dots next to the list items with list style type none. So if we save it after that, the dots will disappear. Then to get our social media icons in line, we're going to use display flex. Then to get our flex items, which we can look at the list items as, we'll need to center them with margin 0 auto. So we're just going to write ul.social li margin 0 auto, and then they're going to be spaced out within that column that we have set at half of the screen width. So what we can do is we can set a max width for the unordered list of 16 rem, and then they're not going to be so spaced out, as you can see right here. And then we'll also just want to center the unordered list with margin 0 auto as well. And that looks pretty good. So now we can resize our social icons. So let's just use that same Font Awesome class from earlier, svg-inline-fa. So I'm going to write footer svg-inline-a, and then font size 2.3 rem. Then what we can do for the hover color is I'm just going to copy the same style declaration and paste it in underneath for the blue shade, and we'll write footer svg inline fa colon hover for the hover pseudo class. And then for the color, it'll be 68A0D2. And then if we save it and look at the Chrome version, it's not right. So, whoops, I have columns instead of color. So the shortcut, I acted a little too quickly there. So I'll just change this to colors and then save it. And there we have our blue color, but they're not spaced as well as the finished version. So let's remove the padding from our unordered list. So underneath margin 0 auto, we'll add padding 0. And now if we save it and we toggle back, it'll match the original version. So let's move down to styling the socket at the very bottom of the page. So for the socket, you might remember that we added a custom class that's a non-Bootstrap class for that, simply called socket. So we'll want to reference that class with period socket for the class. And then let's give it the dark gray background color with the hex value 222 or 62s. Then in addition to that, the finished version also has that small blue border at the top. So let's add a border top style declaration with border top 0.1 rem solid, and we'll use that blue shade we've been using throughout the design of 4981B3. So now if we go back, we should have it matching up to the original completely, except for we have that little white line. So let's get rid of that container and margin class at the very bottom. And that does it for the full width website layout. Now let's lay out our responsive CSS media queries to make the complete website mobile friendly. So now that we have the complete full width version of the website all laid out with our HTML and CSS, we still have a couple of elements that we'll want to add CSS media queries to, specifically the content on top of the image slider, to make sure that it resizes and looks great on all screen widths. So what I'm going to do is pull up a responsive website design tester so we can look at the mobile version of the site and see if there's anything else we need to resize. So scrolling down the page, everything looks pretty good and has good spacing here, including the fixed background section. And everything towards the bottom of the website looks good as well. So the only thing that we'll really need to change will be that content on top of the image slider. So let's go about doing that at the bottom of our style.css document where we have the media queries already started for us. So the media queries that we have set up are going to target the medium screen width and the extra large screen width, which is the first breakpoint. And I'm going to go up to the carousel caption and copy the heading 3 up to the heading 1 because that's what we'll be changing. Then I'll paste that into the extra large screen width media query and delete the border as well as the heading 1 text shadow. And then let's reduce the font size to 2.8 rem from 3.8 rem. And then I'll also delete the text shadow for the heading 3. And let's reduce that to 1.8 rem for its font size. So now if we flex the screen down underneath 1200 pixels in screen width, we're going to have those new font sizes in the reduced size. So now if we go through the different sections, they're going to look pretty good, except for I mentioned towards the beginning of the video that I would show you how to change the layout of the content on top of the image slider at a smaller screen width. So first, let's go back to the image slider and change the class for where we have the content disappear on the first slide. And I'm going to change the DLG block class to DMD block so the content starts to appear once we reach the 768 pixel screen width. So now that we still have the content on the screen, let's add our media query. And I'm actually going to change this to 992. That's my mistake. So I'm going to say 992 pixels here and change that to the large screen width. And then I'll also change the max width to 991.98. So anything under 992 pixels will take on this style. So let's copy the heading 1 and heading 3 style declarations. And I'm going to change the heading 1 to 2.5 rem and the heading 3 to 1.5 rem. Then if we save it, that looks pretty good. And one other thing we could do is reduce the font size of the button. So if we add BTN-LG, we can decrease the font size to 0.95 rem. And then if we save it, that looks good to me. So that does it for the complete tutorial of laying out our Bootstrap website. So for the final lesson, I'm going to show you how to get your own domain name and upload your website to the internet. That way, if you want to upload this design to your own domain name or any website design from the 12 website bundle pack at w3newbie.com, you'll know how to do so. So now let's learn how to upload our website to the internet with our own .com name using a web hosting account. So I'm going to start from my website at w3newbie.com and go to the resources page where I'll have a link to Bluehost, which is the web host we're going to use to upload our website to the internet. Or you can just go to w3newbie.com/hosting, which I'll have a link to in the description. And this link will serve as a discount link to a page that Bluehost has created for me because I've been recommending their hosting services for so long to followers of my website and on YouTube, so followers can get a discount to their hosting plans. So once we're on the plans page, if you're just building one website, I would go with the basic plan, but if you're building more than that, I would go with the plus. But for a single website, the basic plan will serve just fine. You're probably never going to need more than 50 gigabytes in space. You'll get a free SSL certificate, which will give you the lock symbol up here. And then you'll have the option to have subdomains as well as 5 different domain name email accounts, which if you look to the resources page of my website, you'll learn how to add to Gmail. So the email storage wouldn't matter anyways with your emails going to Gmail using your domain name.com email address. So once you select the plan that you want, we're going to be brought to a page where we can create a new domain name or use a domain name we own. So since we get a free domain name anyways, I always choose to create a new one with my Bluehost accounts. And I'm going to sign up with the domain name drew-host.com just for an example domain name. I don't really have one that I'm going to use at this time, but as we can see up top, the domain name is available. So I'm going to add my account information, and I'll skip through the video just for a moment and blur out my info. And then we can choose the package plan or package information. So with Bluehost, because I know that I'm going to need it anyways, I go with the longest term. But if you just want to go with the cheapest amount overall, you can choose the 12-month plan. Then beneath that, we'll have the option to select some package extras. And the only thing that I recommend, depending on your situation, is the domain name privacy and protection. So every domain name that's online has to have something called whois contact information attached to it. It's kind of like if you have a piece of real estate, you have to have an owner's name and information attached to it. So if you want to keep your contact information private, I would choose to have the domain name privacy. That way, Bluehost contact information will be what's public. But if you're using a business address or a PO box or something, you might not need to worry about that. So I'll leave that up to you. I'm going to elect to add the domain name privacy and then add my payment information, which I'll just blur out, and then select I've read and agreed to the terms of service and cancellation policy, which is a 30-day refund policy, I believe. And then I'm going to hit submit. Then once we're signed up, we're going to see that we have a confirmation email sent to us, as well as the option to download the receipt at the bottom of the page. And I'm going to hit create account. Then we'll come to a page where we create our account password attached to our domain name. So I have a password prepared already, and I'll select I've read and agreed to the terms, and then hit create account once more. Then it says our account is ready and we can log in. Then on the login page, we'll just need to add our password once more. And I'm going to hit save with Google Chrome. Then Bluehost is going to run us through a couple of questions here, which we can skip through or you can add your answers to, but it's not going to matter later on. So I'm going to skip through all of this, including the theme options. And the reason that Bluehost is showing all of this is because Bluehost is really popular for WordPress websites. In fact, WordPress themselves recommends Bluehost. So by default, Bluehost adds WordPress to the server for us when we sign up with an account. So to prepare our account for an HTML website instead of WordPress, we'll just need to take 2 simple steps, which I'm going to show you how to do. But before we do that, remember that you're going to have an email from Bluehost, which you'll need to check to verify your domain. So be sure to check for that and click the verification button. So now back on the Bluehost website, we're going to go down to the advanced link here, and I'm going to show you the first step to get rid of WordPress. So this is an optional step, but I would recommend doing it just so you know everything is cleared that was installed on the server for WordPress originally. And we're going to go into MySQL databases. Then once we're in MySQL databases, scroll down and hit delete on the database that you see, and then delete database. And this will delete the WordPress database that was installed automatically. Then we can go back to the advanced screen, and we're going to go to something called File Manager, where we'll delete the WordPress files and add our website files. So once you're here, click on the public_HTML folder right here. And then that's going to bring us into the directory of all of the files on our domain name. So I'm going to hit select all so we can just delete all of the WordPress files that are here at once. And then go up to delete, then skip trash and permanently delete, then hit confirm. And now our directory is completely blank and ready for our website files. So go up and select the upload button. Then we'll be able to drag and drop our HTML files once we add them to a zip folder. So I'm going to use the agency theme from w3newbie.com, and I'm just going to select all the files, right click them, and then hit compress 10 items. So then we'll have our zip folder, and we can drag and drop this zip to Bluehost. So just give it a moment to upload, and then we'll go back to the file manager, and then we'll need to click the zip and then go up to extract and hit extract files and then hit close. And now all of our website files will be on our domain name. So in my case here, some files from my Mac somehow came along with the website file. So I'm just going to delete those and skip the trash. And we can also delete the zip archive that we created because we're not going to need that anymore. And now we're ready to check out our domain name with our website files on it. So I'm going to go up and add my drew-host.com URL. And then if we go to our website, it might be a little bit slow at first because the server space is still getting set up, but you should see your website files uploaded and you can go over to different pages of the website. So for example, I'll just go to the contact us page with the contact form and the Google map. And then the last thing that I'm going to show you how to do is add an SSL certificate, which is the lock symbol next to our website. So that way our website has secure encryption with HTTPS instead of HTTP. So to see that we have the free SSL turned on, we can go to Marketplace on the left. Then once it brings us to the next page, we'll want to look for the add-ons link where it says shop add-ons, even though it's free. And then we'll scroll down to SSL certificates on the right. And then at the very top, we're going to see that auto SSL is on, as we can see right here, because it says it's on and we only have the option to disable it. So it might just take a little bit for the SSL to kick in, but just to make sure that it does, what I'm going to recommend is to simply contact Bluehost's chat support So just click the question mark in the upper right hand corner, and this will bring us to the support page, and I'm going to select chat, and I'll show you how quickly we can get a rep chatting with us here. So I'm going to put in my name, Drew, and then my domain name, drew-host.com, then hit next, and I'll just select tech support and then SSL. Then I'm going to write, hello, I have an HTML website I would like SSL added to. Can you do that for me? Question mark. Then hit find help and start chat. And then we'll just go down and hit start chat again because we don't want to look at the article resources. Okay, so now we have somebody joined. And then we're going to need to verify our account via email. So just wait for it. And then we'll need to check our email for that verification code. So I'm going to pull that up, and there is my verification token. And I'll just prove that it's me by sending him the token, and then he'll be able to help me with it. And I'm not going to leave the whole chat here on video because it took a couple of minutes, but Bluehost has really great chat and phone reps, so I'm sure they'll be able to help you get the SSL set up. And once they do, you'll be able to go over to your domain name with the lock symbol and SSL added, as you can see here on the agency theme, which is uploaded to the domain name I signed up for, drewhost.com. So that does it for the entire tutorial or course. Be sure to check out the resources page at w3newbie.com, which will also teach you how to set up your domain name email address with Bluehost and connect it to your Gmail account so you can get your domain name email there. I want to thank you for watching. Please remember to check out the complete 12 website bundle pack at w3newbie.com, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.